everyone, right out of the gate, this is my first go to full build guide. So any feedback you've got, doesn't matter if it's negative, positive, doesn't even apply to the video, anything like that is really appreciated. So in this, I'll go over mechanics, items, skills, and then I'll also include in the POB leveling trees, leveling items, and then the kind of the stat weights or the goal for the stats that you want on your budget gear. That'll get you rolling into red maps. Alright, so I'm not going to call this a starter build. The goal is to push T16s and see how far I can get on a 1x budget, but a lot of these are going to have, a lot of these builds are going to have uniques that are pretty expensive early on in the first few days. But if you're someone who skips the first weekend, or you just kind of go at a slower pace for the first week or two, these will kind of be perfect for you because you can get to T16s on a 1x budget. Granted, they won't be Headhunter, Super, you know, you won't see Q-Dog playing any of these, but you can still get to red maps, and more importantly, you can still make currency. Speaking of, this is what I had drop from 70 to 90 just in raw currency and fragments. I didn't include any other notable drops or harvest rerolling of cluster jewels, anything like that. So it was about 750 chaos if you ignore the Exalt. So that's pretty good. And again, none of this went back into the character. So the footage in the back that's of the Phoenix map is still 1x budget. Okay, so what is this build? This build is Doomfletch Prism, Rain of Arrow, Petrified Blood Slayer. Now, TurboCloud on Reddit, I have to give him credit. He had posted a Deadeye Tornado Shot version of this, and the whole concept of it sounded so cool, but I kind of wanted to do a little bit different. That's not the traditional archer, and I guess you kind of argue that Slayers have become that recently, but if you're interested in what he did, which is majorly different, I think his character has something like 9,000 HP. I'll include it in the description below. I'll be honest here, I really thought this build was going to crash and burn in white maps. I've never really done bow builds. Like, I've done Toxic Rain, you know, meta stuff like that. So I wasn't really sure how to scale everything properly, but I was super surprised with how smooth this is, and honestly, it's one of the safer builds I've played. I died one time in an Ultimatum map that had really, really bad mods. But aside from that, I mean, you can see in the back, that's a T16 Ultimatum. Never even really come close to dying. So it's super, super safe. And the damage is, again, appropriate for a 1x build. I'll go over the items here in a couple of minutes. But the focus of the build is Doomfletch's Prism and Petrified Blood. Now, Petrified Blood will remove the ability for you to go over 50% of your life except by health flask. In exchange, 40% of any hit you take is then staggered over 4 seconds, so you take a damage over time of that remaining 40%. And then at max gem level, you actually lose 8% of that damage, so you're taking even less. Now this makes recovery and leash super, super impactful because, you know, percent life regen and leash and all that are based off max HP. But since we're sitting at half HP and the damage is delayed, you kind of almost get double benefit from it. So in addition to that, because we're not going over 50% life, we can then reserve an aura on our life pool since we don't need that top half percent. And then that also lets us use the new Bloodthirst support, which gives you flat physical based off your max HP, provided you're under at 50% or under. So you can see in this Phoenix clip here, I'm taking a lot of unnecessary damage, but because our leech is so high and it's based off max HP, we're actually recovering 125% of our effective life pool every second. So unless I take like a 12,000 shot, and I should have tried to tank one of his explosions to see, but unless you take a massive hit, you are not going to die. All right, let's talk items. So again, focus of the build is Doomfletch's Prism, and you can see you gain 100% weapon physical damage as each element. Do note this is the faded version, which means there's a lesser version you can see here called the Doomfletch, and you only get one element instead of all three at the same time. So the nice thing about this build is you can use this one from level 28 and then upgrade it later once you hit, I think it's 54 for the faded version. So what I did was I bought a 6-link of the Doomfletch for about 15C, and then I bought the Prophecy for 2 chaos, which you just have to go kill the Veil Oversoul, and then that gave me the 6-linked bow. Whereas if you just try to go out and get this one, it was like 25 or 30 C. So that's another way you can save money, especially if you're using like a faded item. It'll always keep the links. So just keep that in mind. So in this, we've got Rain of Arrows, which is our main clear. Trinity support, again, because we're hitting with multiple elements always, this is the strongest support aside from Bloodthirst. Vicious projectiles. Now, I'll go over this when I talk about the rings, but if you're having mana issues, you can put Blood Tap here instead, or excuse me, Life Tap instead. Elemental damage with attacks, standard since we're an elemental build. Mirage Archer, this is kind of up to you. I like having it because it's damage while you move. And you can kind of see when I was doing that Ultimatum, I'm on the move a lot. Because even though we have a lot of, you know, recovery and decent defenses, if you stand still and those monkeys come, the big apes with all the auras, they will destroy anyone. So that's why I like Mirage Archer. If you don't like it, don't use it. Just sub in another link. And then again, Bloodthirst, because we are on low life. And this gives somewhere, it's like 2.5 supports worth of damage. And it just scales with max HP. So the more max HP you have, the better it gets. All right, we'll go over the chest next. Now this is up to you. I personally, I know people like to shit on Queen of the Forest and say it's terrible. I love it. It's always been one of my favorites. And since we can't get fortified because we're a bow user, can't get block because we're a bow user, I figured maybe we'll try and lean into the evasion and sort of get a somewhat decent amount. So I figured I love Queen of the Forest. It's got resist. It's got life. We'll go with that. The other nice thing is a 5-link is literally 1 chaos. So our single target is kind of low because we're on a 5-link, but it's still a very good chest for 1 chaos. So inside of it, we've got, Frenzy here. So I tried a bunch of different stuff. This seems to be the best. And what I basically do is I hold down Frenzy and then tap Rain of Arrows to keep Mirage Archer up. You can mess around with different abilities. It gives you frenzy charges on single target. It kind of seems to be the best one that I found. So we've got Frenzy, obviously Bloodthirst because again we're low life, Vicious Projectiles, Hypothermia because we're running Skitter bots, so everything's chilled, and then Trinity support again. So the quiver again is kind of up to you. Really, the only mandatory unique is the Doomfletch. But since I kind of wanted to go with this hyper sustain, you know, super high recovery, I figured why not try this? Plus it's got perfect stats. I mean, it has crit, which is good. Physical attacks, amazing. Attack speed, amazing. Life, amazing. The only downside is the reduced maximum recovery per life leech. But because we hit so often and so fast, it does not matter. So this last line here, the increased maximum recovery, basically, it takes us from, it's something like 2,400 life leached a second to 3,500, which is, again, it's huge. And it puts us at 125% of our life leached a second. So amazing sustain. I would recommend using this. It's also dirt cheap. The rest of these items and links are in no particular order. Especially with the sockets, it's kind of wherever you can easily get the colors, because some of them are kind of weird since we're using evasion bases. But for your helm, resist, obviously, as much life as you can get. If you can get an accuracy roll here for cheap, do that. You'll see on my gloves I've got accuracy. You want at least 1, otherwise you're a little bit off hit cap, but it's not a huge thing. So again, super high resist, super high life, as much as you can afford. You do cast some damage taken. It's up to you. I just do Immortal Call because it gives us that split second for our recovery to just bring us back up to full life. Blood Rage, Frenzy charges, and Leech and attack speed, mandatory for any physical build, really. And then Lightning Golem, this is kind of a toss away. You don't really need it. I just do it because. All right, we'll talk about jewelry as a whole here. Fill in your resists. Obviously, that's the most important thing. If you don't have max resist, you're going to die. Life, and then flat fizz on all of it. So Some luxury things, if you can start affording them, are things like increased elemental damage with attack skills, which I got this for 1 chaos. I think I got pretty lucky, especially because the life gain on hit really benefits us because we're hitting so often. But this is kind of what you want to aim for on all your jewelry is the flat fizz, the life, and then the increased damage with elemental attack skills. So you can see on here, resist, life, flat fizz. So you ideally want to get a level 3 Enlighten, which would break the 1x budget. So if you do not have a level 3 Enlighten, what you have to do pretty much is run life tap support in your 6-link setup, because otherwise you just will not have mana. So you can see 31 free mana. That's not even enough to cast Rain of Arrows. Now, putting life tap in your 6-link setup is still more damage than if you lost one of your auras. So if you do not have the level 3 Enlighten, or you can't manage your mana well enough, just put life tap in that main setup, because you don't want to lose one of your auras for that. So, and you can see on this ring, it's a pile of shit. It's just, all I wanted was the elemental weakness on hit. You can see it's lightning damage to attacks, which helps a little bit. But the main reason I have it is the elemental weakness on hit. So before I was using it, I was actually using this Profane Proxy ring with elemental weakness socketed into it. So what that does is it turns the chilling aura from our skitterbots into the curse. So if you go that route, just make sure to take hypothermia out of your single target setup, because you won't have the reliable chill anymore. Boots, nothing crazy. Life, resist, movement speed. Try to get 30%. You can get away with 25 if it saves you a lot of money. But typically where I'm spending the most money is 6-link boots and belt, just because it has so many good stats. But you're not going to see any influence modifiers or anything like that. So as far as links go, dash and second wind, you can use blink arrow with faster attacks. I would stick to dash because there's really no startup animation. Like, even if you're slowed or chilled, you can still dash a lot faster, which is why you see a lot of the, you know, higher end streamers, hardcore people, they pretty much stick straight to this or like flame dash. Herald of Ice, and that will be linked to arrogance. So this is what's reserving on our life. This just helps with clear. You know, Herald of Ice pops, I think everybody can agree, are fucking awesome. So it also gives us some flat damage too. Belt here, nothing crazy. I would aim for a Stygian Vice if you can get one. This one I actually had to start looking through ones that had no enchant or an open prefix, because otherwise it just gets way expensive. So keep that in mind when you're looking, that if it's got, you know, an open prefix and a suffix and it's got some crafted resist on there that you don't need, you can take that off and add something like this. So that'll go a long way in saving you money as well. Inside, just flat fizz and life for the jewel. You can also get a onslaught jewel, which is what I have in here. So whichever one, I would recommend getting either onslaught or phasing on one of these jewels, and then whichever one you don't get, you cover with your flask. Gloves here, we got flat fizz, life, whatever resist you still need, and then I would also try to get the accuracy rating. You end up being a little bit off hit cap, but try and get it if you can. If not, no big deal. And again, look for like crafted mods that maybe somebody put a caster mod on you or something that you can take off and then put something that's valuable to you. That'll always be a handy skill no matter what build you're doing. So then links, Petrified Blood for obvious reasons, Herald of Purity, and then Skitterbots. So again, I found like a level 2 Enlighten and then leveled it up. If you don't have one, again, just put life tap in your 6-link and you're good to go. I would try and get one of these and just level it up just to have, because most builds will take advantage of it. All right, so lastly, we got Flasks. So again, these are my recommendations. You can change them. There are some things that'll cost more money that you can do to get a lot more damage, but this is what I went with. So we got a Jade Flask. I put the evasion rating roll on this. It does not matter which flask it's on, but they do not stack. So you can have, 4 of them and expect them to stack. It doesn't work like that. So Jade Flask, Diamond Flask, we're crit build, so we need this no matter what. I always run a Warding Flask. I just hate curses, especially temp chains. It drives me crazy. Quicksilver, whatever rolls you can get. I prefer these. There are some people that prefer different rolls on them, but it's personal preference, really. And then a Quartz Flask, which I just like the extra dodge, and I'll show you after this kind of what our defenses are real quick. And this also gives phasing. So again, if you have a phasing Abyssal Jewel, I would use an Onslaught Flask instead of this one. But the reason I set it up that way is because then if you run this one, you get the extra dodge. And then lastly, a Life Flask with bleed on it. If we had a Corrupted Blood immunity jewel, this would be a damage flask. But again, budget build, so we didn't do that. So this is simply just to get rid of the bleeding. I'll be honest though, a lot of the time, it's not even needed. I'll have 10 stacks of it and I can't even tell. So finally, here are my defensive stats. Not great. You're not going to be 99% evasion, can't be hit. But again, we've got so much recovery that anything that does slip through, we just instantly heal. So you can see with Flasks up, we've got 52, 42 dodge, and 44 evasion, which it's decent. So it's a defensive layer. I know hardcore guys might be like cringing right now, but again, I only had 1 death going up to 90. I am perfectly happy with how defensive this build is for how little was spent on it. If you've made it this far, thank you. Seriously. I had a lot of fun doing this. I had a lot of fun on the character. And my goal is to do like 1 of these a week. Hopefully, we'll see if I get like writer's block for build making. But as for right now, I've got this one. I have a Gladiator Bleed Blade Storm that I've already finished. I just kind of have to go over the items and kind of do all that recording stuff. And then currently I just hit maps on a Reap Trap build, which I've never played traps before. So it's kind of scaring me, but honestly, it's kind of looking good. Like surprisingly good, but we'll see. So anyway, thank you again, and I'll see you next time.